Good afternoon. My name is Julie Flory. I'm the Director of Public Relations at the University of Notre Dame. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today and to thank you for joining us on what is really a very exciting day for all of us at Notre Dame, along with our partners. A couple of items of business before we begin, if I may. Regarding the format of the event, our panel of speakers will each offer brief remarks, and then they'll take questions. So we'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind please holding your questions until the end. In addition to our speakers, we also have a number of our other colleagues in the audience today who may be called upon to answer questions that pertain to their particular areas of expertise. At the conclusion of our event, they, along with our speakers, will be available for further conversation. Also, for those of you who tweet or otherwise use social media, we do have, and in particular our guests who are visiting us on the phone, we've designated the ND-GAIN hashtag. That's hashtag NDGAIN, all one word, for this discussion, and we'll be taking questions on Twitter that are either tagged with that hashtag or directed at ND_ECI. That's the Twitter feed for Notre Dame's Environmental Change Initiative. And now we'd like to begin with a short video presentation introducing ND-GAIN.
Our changing climate. How will it affect you if you live in Vietnam, or Uganda, or England? How are we prepared for the impact of a warming planet? Since 2010, the Global Adaptation Index has been collecting data and ranking nations around the world based on their vulnerability to climate-related hazards and their readiness to adapt. This year, the index moved to Notre Dame, where it's now part of one of the nation's strongest research programs on climate adaptation. Each country is scored on indicators like food capacity, urban concentration, water access, and even business freedom. Countries can then take steps to move toward more positive scores.
So we did a thorough research of universities in the United States, and we found among all the schools around the United States that Notre Dame was the perfect fit for the ND-GAIN index and for the work on adaptation, because it privileges human beings, individuals, and their power to innovate and create.
By bringing the Notre Dame GAIN Index into partnership with our research in climate change adaptation, we will, on a global scale, be able to change decisions that will improve human safety worldwide and improve our management of nature.
This is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and it helps the public and decision makers understand and make sense of this great challenge. That may mean planting trees or changing the ways that we deal with cities to reduce urban death, for example. Or it may mean ways that we need to alter agricultural practices to increase agricultural yields, especially in developing countries, because the old ways won't work as well under climate change.
Superstorm Sandy is the most recent dramatic example of the changes that are going on in global climate, and it highlights the importance of better understanding our need to adapt to changing climate.
Personally, the exciting aspect of the ND-GAIN is it allows us to move from what we do on our computers, what we do with our data, what we do in our algorithms, and see it's touching somebody's life. It's touching a society, it's touching a state, it's touching a region, it's touching a country.
Over the next few years, hundreds of billions of dollars will be spent by businesses and governments in response to a warming world. The Notre Dame GAIN Index will help guide those expenditures in the places where they're most needed to better protect people.
And now let's go ahead and begin with our first speaker. I'd like to introduce Ken Hirsch, the CEO and founder of NGP Energy Capital Management and chairman of the Global Adaptation Institute. Ken?
Thank you. And I want to congratulate everybody on the wonderful staff of the Institute as well as Notre Dame University for being such great early partners, and we look forward to a wonderful partnership going forward. Adaptation is now. The era of climate change denial is behind us. It's over, and the world moves on. The goal of being more gentle on the planet is one that we should all aspire to, but the politicization as well as the disjointed nature of climate mitigation as the sole priority has really been one that has been a major distraction. And while we've been distracted with that initiative, the world has begun to show what happens when the climate changes. As population grows, economic development happens, urbanization increases, and temperatures rise, we are now feeling the effects of what will happen. And so a couple of years ago, a group of us were inspired to create the Global Adaptation Institute and its offspring, the Global Adaptation Index. And what was important about the index is it gives us a unique and coherent way to measure both vulnerability and readiness on how we're able as a world and down to the country-specific level to adapt to a changing planet. The index is unique because the world seemed to focus on vulnerability. They focused on who was most at risk. But by combining both the vulnerability axis with the readiness axis, we were able to really measure where society can make the most inroads with the best bang for the buck and be a guidepost for both the public sector and the private sector to come together and mobilize the massive amount of resources that will be needed over the next 50+ years to adapt to a changing climate. So it's unique, it's useful, it's coherent, it's measurable, it's transparent, and it's global. And that was what we set out to do. And we've done it, and now we've done it on a grander scale, bringing the highlight of how countries can adapt to a changing planet and married it with a great research institution like the University of Notre Dame. It's a thrilling moment for us to watch what we've given birth to go to the next level. And it's an honor to find such a perfect partner for me. And as a result, the Natural Gas Partners Foundation has, in addition to the venture with ND-GAIN, added $2 million in the form of a donation to make sure that the index itself can be sustained and enhanced under their great leadership. A great university, great leadership, and visionary. That's what makes a great combination. So it's a wonderful day for us, and it's a wonderful day, I think, for the prioritization of dealing with a changing planet. Now it's a great honor to introduce the founding Chief Executive Officer of the Global Adaptation Institute, my friend and former Managing Director of the World Bank, Dr. Juan Jose Dabou.
Thank you, Ken. Buenos dias. I'm Juan Jose Dabou, the founding CEO of the Global Adaptation Institute and chairman of the World Economic Forum Agenda Council on Climate Change. I would like to echo Ken's words with respect to how excited we are about this partnership with Notre Dame. Last year, we decided we had a choice. We could continue to grow GAIN organically, or we could partner with a major university to launch GAIN forward at a much faster pace. We surveyed the different universities around the United States. We selected the top 10 from coast to coast and came away most impressed with Notre Dame's climate adaptation program, which is housed in the Environmental Change Initiative on campus. Even though the GAIN index has only been around for a few years, it has attracted a lot of attention in a short period of time. More than 150 CEOs, top executives, leaders of major NGOs and foundations, as well as government leaders, attended our annual meeting here in Washington last May. They are attracted to the index because it is a simple tool that charts a nation's vulnerability to climate change and other global trends and its readiness to adapt. And then it ranks nations according to the rest of the world. The goal is to direct capital investment to the places around the world that need it the most. What's more, at their request, we have given briefings to both the CIA and USAID about the index, and we look forward to working with both agencies more in the future. But we want to do more, faster, because the situation is urgent. That's what led us to Notre Dame. The university adds valuable academic credentials to the index, and we look forward to working with them to create more detailed and granular versions of the index in the future. When I worked at the World Bank, I was responsible for more than 100 countries around the world, including in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. And it became clear to me that adaptation was an urgent issue in the developing world, and people were fed up about politicians thinking about the next election and not the next generation. Listening to the most important stakeholder, the voiceless, the vulnerable, I heard that what they want is an opportunity and not a handout. Adaptation is a way to rapidly converge into effective actions and produce immediate benefits, including life-saving benefits. Adaptation is the opportunity for people to take destiny into their own hands, to innovate and to create. Notre Dame is the best school to take GAIN closer to the people in need because of the university's track record of putting the human being at the center of their actions. And now I would like to introduce you to the person at Notre Dame who's taking the baton of the GAIN Index. Dr. David Lodge, Professor of Biological Sciences and Director of the Notre Dame Environmental Change Initiative. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Juan Jose, and thank you, Ken. We're thrilled to be entrusted with your brainchild of GAIN, and we look forward to continuing to working with you over the next many years on what you have started. I'm David Lodge. I'm the Director of the Environmental Change Initiative at Notre Dame, and the GAIN Index will dramatically increase the depth and the breadth of Notre Dame's research and outreach efforts on climate change adaptation. Climate change adaptation is one of the major pillars of our work, of our focus areas in the Environmental Change Initiative at Notre Dame. The other areas include invasive species, land use, and along with climate change and climate change adaptation, the impacts of those other changes on water quality and water quantity at local, regional, and global scales. We do all of this work, including the work in climate change adaptation, in the spirit of translation, in the spirit of science serving society. In other words, we don't want to be the researchers who fiddle while people suffer. We want to be the researchers who help offer solutions to climate change adaptation. And in just 2 years, under Juan Jose and Ken and others' stewardship, GAIN has has garnered the attention and the use by many multinational corporations, by non-governmental organizations, and by governmental agencies, including those in the intelligence and development communities. We will continue at Notre Dame to get GAIN into the hands of those who can make a difference in the world. It's my pleasure now to introduce the two key lead scientists who will take over the effort at the University of Notre Dame, starting with biologist Jessica Hellman, who has and will continue to lead our research program in climate change adaptation at Notre Dame, followed by big data scientist Natasha, who is also the director of Notre Dame's Interdisciplinary Center on Interdisciplinary Center on Network Science and Applications. So first Jessica and then Natasha.
All
right, thank you, David, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Professor Jessica Hellman, and I direct the University of Notre Dame's Climate Change Adaptation Program in the Environmental Change Initiative. And this is a very exciting day for us at the University of Notre Dame and our program. It's an exciting day for adaptation in general, I believe. And adaptation is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and what we plan to do is combine the intellectual resources of GAIN with the University of Notre Dame's leading research capacity in adaptation to help decision makers prepare for this grand challenge. Now, adaptation has really become a prominent topic here in the last couple of years, especially this past year with events like Hurricane Sandy and the fact that 34,000 high temperature records were broken, for example, just in the United States. And people around the world are beginning to come to terms or come to grips with the fact that they're going to need to adapt to this changing climate. That might mean moving farther inland from the coast, finding new ways to protect essential ecosystems, or designing novel ways to just keep people in cities cooler. As many of you know, under the UN-led climate talks, billions of dollars have been pledged to help people around the world adapt to a changing climate. But many questions remain about where those resources should be invested and how they should be spent. And the GAIN Index provides decision makers with the kind of information that can help prioritize where adaptation actions should take place. The University of Notre Dame was one of the first universities to host a climate change adaptation program, and we see GAIN as a very important addition. We have a track record of research that enables adaptation innovation, and ND-GAIN is exactly the kind of innovation that the world needs. We're particularly excited about taking what others have referred to, take the index to the next level with, for example, adding new granularity. And of course, we will continue to release the index annually. We look forward to diving deeper and ranking and evaluating states and provinces within nations. For example, the 50 states, or say, the provinces in China. And we're excited about all of this because ND-GAIN is driven to produce research that informs decision-making among government officials, the private sector, and NGOs. And my colleague in computer science, Professor Natasha, has a few more words to say about how we at Notre Dame will build upon the previous work of GAIN.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, everyone. So I'm Professor Natasha, Director of the Notre Dame Interdisciplinary Center on Network Science and Applications. And I will be the final speaker today, and we'll be happy to entertain all your questions after me. So what excites me about GAIN is that at the core of it, at its heart, it's a story about data. It's a story about translating big data into real solutions that have a real society and global impact. And that Notre Dame has a long and successful research program in big data, and we have a track record of translating this research to make a difference. Call it data science for the common good, enabling big data-driven decision-making for benefit of humanity. And now we look forward to doing that with ND-GAIN, which is what the index will be called at Notre Dame. The ND-GAIN partnership is truly a convergence of academia, NGOs, the private sector, and government, all to make a difference for the common good. We want to provide an intellectual basis for guiding adaptation strategies and investment among different nations and among states within nations, so they can better prepare for a warmer world and the challenges that lay ahead. We're looking forward to making a granular index to inform decision-making at the grassroots level for the private sector, government officials, and NGOs. And I want to emphasize that the index is and will continue to be all open source. We want to stress on the transparency of the index, so anyone can come in, take a look at the data, do a deep dive inside the data, take a look at the analytics which are guiding the ranking of different countries, and have a dialogue about it. And that's the transparency and open source we want to stress. So we are very excited about this partnership, and stay tuned for more news in the future. Thank you, And we'll take your questions now.
Questions from the floor? Yes.
Hi, my name is Eric Street from USAID. Is there any effort planned to build capacity in other places so that this resource can be used at all different levels?
So the question is if there are plans to build capacity of resources so that this plan can be used at different levels. David, you just light the microphone.
Yes, thanks for the question.
Thanks.
I'll take a start, and Jessica or Natasha wants to add anything, they should feel free. There we go. How's that? So it is our hope and intention as we build capacity during this transition and afterwards to work with partners in the areas, the regions, or the nations in which we might make the index more granular. So I think by doing what we are starting today, we will be helping to build capacity not only at Notre Dame and with our corporate and public partners that GAIN has been working with and that we will continue to be working with, but we will also be building knowledge and capacity in countries around the world that are already included in the GAIN index.
Other questions? Yes.
Ken, I suspect there may be a little bit of a personal story as to how and why you got into this area in the first place.
You suspect right. I was living in London in 2008 and 2009. Moved to London late 2008. If there was any problem in the world, it was going to be solved at Copenhagen. And Copenhagen was this answer to the climate, to the climate debate. We're going to work out the world's problems. 192 countries are going to get together in Copenhagen and solve the problem. I sat there and thought for a minute, 192 countries couldn't agree on what to have for dinner tonight, and let alone on a 50-year plan and $1 trillion with no cheating. And so the problem of the climate is something that, as somebody who's an investor in the natural resources industry, who knows the numbers, the general push towards renewable energy resources, while that's very important for the long-term nature of the planet as well as just the whole energy complex, it doesn't really move the needle. And the no amount of the United States developing solar or wind was going to matter overall to the climate when China was opening up a new coal-fired power plant, 1 per week. And so looking at forward past Copenhagen and saying, well, if the world is going to have to realize that the planet's changing, and the plan, if you will, to fix it, which was at the time renewable energy, is something that would take an order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude, greater implementation and cooperation, and still may be too late. It really dawned on me that the world needs to elevate the concept of adaptation. Climate change is real, and we should always work on being more gentle to the planet, as we should about global health, education, human rights. And I think adaptation ought to be on that same level as a global priority. And so that was what really inspired me to help found the Institute, was really to say that the wonderful thing about the human race is that we've been adapting for thousands and thousands of years. Why should this generation be the one that adopted the turn back the clock strategy? We should be thinking forward, and thinking forward says the planet has been changing for millions of years. Whether human beings have accelerated the change this time or not, that's for people much smarter than me to figure out. But the planet is obviously changing, and in addition to that, population is going from 7 billion to 10 billion. Another 600 million people are expected to join the ranks of consumerism and a middle class. That has its own impact. Massive urbanization. All of these things, plus climate change, result in a changing planet. And so that's where I said we need to get away from just this energy debate and elevate the concept of adaptation. And it's almost irrelevant what the source is, because the source could be one of 50 things, and it probably is. But the answer is we need to elevate it just like we need to elevate global health and global education and human rights. We can sit here and debate about what it caused it, but we also have to deal with where we're going. So that was it came about sitting in London and discussing it with people and really coming to the conclusion that dealing with a problem such as this in the context of 192 countries was really going to be relatively unworkable. And so thinking beyond what happens next is where it evolved from.
We had a question come in on Twitter, actually, that I will read. It's directed at Dr. Daboub. Have there been any examples on how the private sector has used the GAIN index already?
Yes, there are several examples. I can maybe quickly quote a few of them. Last year, for example, GAIN recognized the efforts that organizations are doing, like PING in Botswana, Engineers Without Borders in Peru, and Ushahidi, which is a company that produces data and information that can be used and translated whenever there is an emergency or rebuilding efforts are needed. All of those organizations are working primarily with the private sector, whether these are companies that are in the telecommunications business, insurance companies, food companies that are involved in agribusiness or in the insurance industry as well. And more recently, one of the largest US companies shared with us how they are using at the board level the now ND-GAIN index, not only to show to their members of the board the internal rate of return they can get on a specific project, but how, by investing in whether it is water, food, agriculture, energy, or coastal protection, they can help build a more resilient, a more adaptive society in the countries where they are engaged. This is so they use the index to actually show that if their investments in water in Africa, for example, are increased by this much, and within Africa, in which countries, let's say, the best public policies are in place, then that will be an area natural for this particular company to make their investments. That's on the private sector side. I can go on the public sector side because there are governments that are also using the ND-GAIN index to actually prioritize some of their public funding, some of their investments on public infrastructure or on public-private partnerships. And just a final comment, organizations like the World Food Program has used the index to actually persuade their board to allocate resources to Mozambique in the drought or in an emergency that took place last year. We have a lot of that information in the ND-GAIN website, and I'm happy to expand as time allows.
Thank you. Other question? Thought I saw another hand. Yes?
Well, I have another one. I'm sure I can get this information if I looked into the website and so forth, but just I'd like to hear your comments. Was there any thought or does the index differentiate between the need for adaptation and the opportunity for adaptation? Because there are situations where the need is great, but there's not that much you can do, versus a situation where there's a lot you can do, although the need isn't as severe as somewhere else. I mean, is that concept been incorporated into the models?
If I may repeat the question for people on the phone, does the index differentiate between the need for adaptation and the, and I'm sorry, the opportunity, thank you, for adaptation?
Yes, I'm going to take a shot at it, and then maybe, and also Ian Noble and Bruno Sanchez, who started this work at the Institute. can also complement. But the answer is on the readiness access. When you look at that, you will see issues related to the rule of law, to the labor code, how fiscally sound a country is, the monetary policy of a country, the access to knowledge, the access to technology, how strong institutions are, and whether there is corruption or not in the countries. And so you make, as Ken described before, a very good match between how vulnerable, what is the current state of a particular country in terms of their vulnerabilities, their exposure to weather-related events, to access to water, to access to health on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis, you have this other matrix which measures your capacity to attract investments, to minimize or cure, if you want, the vulnerabilities that countries have and face. I don't know, Ian or Bruno, if you would like to add something, or someone else.
Yes. So I don't know if you can see the graph here. I'm Bruno Sanchez.
Here, let's hand him the microphone.
Yes, so very quickly what Dr. Daoud said, if you can see the graph here, the matrix, you see the vulnerability and the readiness. And with this graph, you can take a look to those issues. If you want to identify the countries that are purely more vulnerable, or you want to cross that with the readiness one, because depending who you are, you might be interested in looking at countries that are less ready. Let's say, for example, if you are more a public source of investment like the World Bank or a development agency, or you want to look at more countries that are more ready, so your investments are going to produce, has the higher chance of producing more results to reduce the vulnerability. But with this graph, with this idea that created the index, you can distinguish between these two ideas.
I just wanted to add one thing briefly. I think that when GAIN first came to Notre Dame and we started discussing this important product that GAIN had produced, I think that was one of the things that was more compelling to us. One of the most compelling things to us as researchers is there's actually quite a bit of power in separating the idea of risk from capacity. And then you can begin to imagine why is it that certain countries occupy different quadrants in the matrix that Bruno pointed out. And countries can begin to learn from one another in terms of how would you enhance your capacity or reduce your risk. And that both of those dimensions are important, but how you would go about achieving them might be quite different. And it will also mean different things to different kinds of investors as well. I think that's quite exciting.
Yes. Are there particular areas of the index will be expanded on as far as increasing the resolution?
I can take a stab at this. One, Jose, you might want to. So this is an important goal for our the ND-GAIN project or initiative moving forward. We're still identifying. It will be partly a function of data availability and also stakeholder necessity. But there certainly is quite a bit of interest in doing it for the United States. And we're currently working on how about going about doing that. But we're also putting in place the capacity at Notre Dame to do that, because it will be, as Professor Chavla indicated, it will be a fairly data-intensive project, but it is one of our highest priorities. Do you want to say that? Okay.
Great. We have a question that came in also on Twitter. One moment, please. Thank you. This came in on Twitter from someone in the room, actually. Bola from Nat Geo Energy is asking, how's that for social media interaction there? Rio +20 was supposed to herald concrete change and resolutions from governments, but the consensus has been that it was a failure. Looking forward, how long until the index is fully utilized, given this hesitation and slow progress?
Well, I think in part, Ken had mentioned when he responded to his question that, and I experienced that when I was at the World Bank as managing director, seeing 192, almost 200 countries trying to agree on something, it just takes too much time. And so we wanted to put together what you see now, run with a very, if you want, pragmatic approach by very pragmatic people, based, of course, on data and research, but making that as practical as possible and use that as a way of accelerating the results in terms of ideas, matrix, which is what we are seeing here today, but also, to the extent possible, influence other global governance bodies that can also help accelerate the the urgent need to elevate the understanding about, again, the urgent need to adapt. And to that effect, we are very actively involved with the World Economic Forum. Both Ken, Bruno Sanchez is a young professional there, and so is Peter Anin, and I that chair the Climate Change Agenda Council. And at the same time, we are working very close with the UNFCCC on pilot projects that demonstrate how practical solutions can be put forward. So by developing the ND-GAIN index, by bringing to the table people from academia, from the private sector, from civil society, with some very pragmatic approaches, with a very practical product, a navigation chart, as it is the ND-GAIN index, we are to an extent injecting competition or encouraging other organizations to move faster because people cannot wait. People are in urgent need. I see it in my own country, El Salvador, periodically, and I see it in the many countries I have visited. So I think that by moving to Notre Dame, we will even accelerate more the process of persuading decision makers at all levels, whether it is in the public arena and the global arena or at the local level, to move faster in this direction.
I'll add one thing to that as well. I think as Ken and Juan Jose have sort of laid the foundation for this argument, adaptation is local, and the information that we provide with the GAIN index can motivate action, decisions and actions at a local and regional level much more quickly than one can imagine, for example, global decisions and implementation. People are ready for good information that can lead sound investments in adaptation, and that's what we hope to provide with the index.
Thank you. And Bola did not tweet that from the room. I was confused. Sorry about that. Any other questions? Great. Then that concludes our event. Thank you again for being here with us today, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Our speakers will stick around for a while if you need to speak to anyone. Thank you.